Well, it's my privilege and really an honor tonight to get to introduce our guest speaker, Congressman Louie Gohmert. The hardest thing is to introduce someone who really needs no introduction, right? Congressman, you truly are among friends and family here. This group follows you. We know you, and we love you, and we're very appreciative of you tonight. We're 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, and I, for one, am very thankful for you and the few men and women like you in Washington who are willing to risk and sacrifice to fight for us. Congressman Gohmert he took office in January of 2005, so he deserves credit for being able to spend 10 years in the United States Congress. He represents 120 miles of Texas' eastern border, District 1. And Congressman Gohmert has truly been the leading conservative fighter in the United States House of Representatives on a number of issues. In the fight for life, Congressman Gohmert has been on the front lines. In the fight for Israel, to protect Israel at all costs, Congressman Gohmert, along with our Congressman Johnson, has been on the front lines. In the fight to replace or try to replace moderate House leadership with conservative House leadership, Congressman Gohmert has been on the front lines. In the fight for tax reform, in the fight for government transparency, in the fight for the issues that we hold so dear and care about, for the rule of law and limited government, in the fight against the reckless Obama administration, this man has been on the front lines, and oftentimes he's been alone. And so more than anything tonight, we want to welcome you. We're excited to hear from you, but we want you to know how appreciative we are for you. I hope you'll join me in praying for Congressman Gohmert, for the few men and women like him who are, yes, proud Republicans, but who are true, courageous conservatives. They need our prayers. Their families need our prayers. And we're excited to hear from you tonight. And welcome to Collin County. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Louie Gohmert.
Well, thank you. Oh, thank y'all so much. Thank you. Wow. What a great introduction, Jeff. Thank you so much. And if you do end up praying for me, I don't need prayers for courage, okay? That's not an issue. I need prayers for wisdom. That's what, and I know the promise is made. If you ask for wisdom, then it's given. But my problem with that verse is we're not told when. So I've been praying for decades, and I'm hoping someday I'm going to get a little bit. I know the promise is there. It's going to happen someday. But, it's interesting. Sometimes our greatest strength can end up being a weakness, an Achilles heel. It's like if you're not afraid of anybody or anything, and Mike Pence, we had just had I'd had a brutal confrontation with the speaker in our private conference, and I walked on the floor, Mike Pence, now governor Indiana, but he said, "Louie, we were just laughing. You're not afraid of anything or anybody." And I said, "Well, I fear God." And he said, "It's just an expression, but anyway." But even courage can be an Achilles heel, because if you're not afraid of anybody or anything, then everybody wants you to fight their fights. And there's so many good, important fights out there that trying to figure out which fights you get into and which may marginalize the more important, those are important issues. But I grew up in Mount Pleasant. Some of y'all know where Mount Pleasant is. And it was so good. I just love that town. It was so good to me. You look at my resume, sometimes it says I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. Well, my parents lived in Mount Pleasant, and Mother was in labor for so long, the doctor said, "Hey, it's going to be a while. Pittsburgh's just fixed up their hospital. Let's go over there." So 10 miles away. But anyway, I grew up in Mount Pleasant. And then when I finished the 4 years I owed the Army from an Army scholarship at A&M, And by the way, I know a lot of folks here, we got some Aggies, but people have been giving A&M grief about the football team. You need to understand, I am so proud of Texas A&M deciding this year we're going to concentrate on academics. I just think that's awesome, right? You know, some people are worried about football, but it's, you know. But anyway, my mother was brilliant, and I can't tell you how many times at church meetings, community meetings, neighborhood meetings, I'd be going, "Mother, sit down, you're embarrassing us." And she'd say, "No, this needs to be fixed." And she would just let them have it. And so then my kids were doing that to me, and I realized somewhere along the way, my mother may not be around physically, but I'm carrying a lot of my mother in me. So anyway, it's the way it goes. But I was an assistant DA for a while, and I was told by the DA in Mount Pleasant that a death penalty case back when they were still using the electric chair. This just gives you an idea of the area I grew up in and the way people think there. But when you pick a jury, I know a lot of you know, but when you pick a jury for a capital murder case, if someone could never under any circumstances give the death penalty, then they can't sit on the jury. They're disqualified. Because in any criminal case, you have to be able to consider the full range of punishment. And so the DA was explaining this some years before I got there, explaining it to the jury panel. And he said, "So I've got to ask, and it's important that you be honest about it. Is there anybody here who could not give the death penalty if the evidence justified it?" And again, this is days of the electric chair down. And one guy raised his hand, and he said, "Yes, sir. You couldn't give the death penalty if the facts justified it?" He said, "Well," he said, "they do that down in Huntsville, don't they?" And he said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I could do it on a weekend, but I hate to drive down there in the middle of the week, you know, because I got cows, and I have to have somebody take care of my cows while I go do that." And anyway, so that's a pretty conservative juror, right? You know, that's what I came from, all right? Yeah, I'll go throw that switch, but let me do it on a weekend. But anyway, so just a little background. That's kind of where I came from. And I know we've had some people come from up north, whether it's Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and we're still thrilled, Irene, you're here in Texas, aren't we? I mean, you are awesome. You're just awesome. So I was asked to touch on a few things that hopefully can encourage you, because we know, I mean, if you're a conservative, there's plenty of things to be discouraged about. I mean, and I really do. I get down, and there's some people that still won't speak to me that used to be friends in Congress. But there is a lot to be encouraged about. For example, about 15, 16 months ago, John Boehner was Speaker of the House. Eric Cantor was Majority Leader. And here we are 15, 16 months later, they're both gone. That's pretty amazing. So if you've been praying for stronger leadership in Washington, well, I'd say you're getting some good answers coming along here. And yes, it is true. I did not support Paul Ryan for Speaker. And some people got frustrated with me because they were saying, "You supported Dan Webster, and he's not near as conservative as you." Dan Webster represented his district in Florida. It was a district that before him had elected a guy named Alan Grayson. But Dan is such a man of integrity that he not only beat Grayson, but he beat him strongly enough. Grayson knew And if you go back and look, there were some of the nastiest, meanest lies on Dan spread by Grayson, just unconscionable. He is a strong, incredibly devout Christian guy, Dan. And Grayson left the district, moved to another district so he'd have a chance of winning. Unfortunately, he did find a Republican he could beat, so he's back in Congress. But Dan beat him, and beat him strongly, in a district that can go either way. But he's the only man I knew in the country had done the unthinkable, and that is be Speaker of the House, in his case, the Florida legislature, first Republican since Reconstruction, bless you. And he took his own power away and spread it back among the members, where it should have been to start with. But whether it's a Congress, a state legislature, a country, or whether it's going back to ancient Israel, there is this feeling, some say it's a God-shaped vacuum, but there's this feeling we need a hero. We need some person to be our king, to tell us what to do. Even to the point that 3 years ago, we had one of our guys from the class of 2010, that incredible, amazing conservative wave, biggest conservative wave maybe ever, but awesome. And we were given majority back in the House. One of them stood up to the microphone in our conference, and there had been a lot of fussing back and forth over not cutting the spending that we promised, the CR that was coming up, a lot of back and forth. And he gets up and said, "Mr. Speaker, you're our shepherd. We're your sheep. You tell us what we should do." Anyway, I know. People get tired of me standing up in our conference and talking, and that was one I thought, everybody knows how I feel. I've made it clear. They're mad. And when he said that, I'm going, gag me. I can't sit here for that. So anyway, I had to get up and say, look, I respect the position of Speaker, but I have a heavenly shepherd, and I got 700,000 shepherds back home. You're not any of my shepherds. But anyway, but the point being that there is this temptation that people have to want to move toward one leader that will just solve all our problems and take care of our problems. And our founders knew that. They had seen that anytime you start trying to break away and give people freedom, then their tendency is to go back and want one central powerful leader that will be this benevolent dictator that will make sure that everything goes good. And you're not going to have it in this life. It ain't going to happen. And so you people would not be here if you hadn't already, bless you, if you hadn't already figured that out, right? That's why you're active. That's why you got so many active officers. Awesome. That is just fantastic. But there's still that tendency, even among Republicans in Congress. And that's what we have to fight against. And that's what the founders knew we would be. It would be an ongoing battle. And that's why when Franklin, as you remember, was asked, "What did you give us?" And he said, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Because he knew the tendency is, well, we'll just give in and let somebody take more power. And it had happened in Congress. But Dan did the unthinkable, and he spread out the power. And people that were in the Florida legislature had said, I didn't think anybody'd ever do it. He spread out the power, and we got more done. And like the federal Congress, they were like 20% approval rating. But once he gave the power back to all the members, they were energized. They got more conservative things done. They got more things passed, even with a Democratic governor. And it can make a difference when you energize people and give them their freedom and let them pursue what they believe. But I'm telling you, for 5 years now, since we had been back in the majority, we have been told, well, we can't do anything big, because that might risk the majority. Are you kidding me? That's insane. That's why, we couldn't get that through the Senate, so there's no use in trying here in the House. Are you kidding me? The only way you'll ever get something through the Senate is if we pass it in the House and we raise enough cane about it that eventually the Senate sees this is a political nightmare if we don't go ahead and get something done. Which brings me to something that I've been working on since I got to Congress, and ends up being a positive thing, although it's not the law yet. But back when I was a district judge in Tyler, and by the way, after I finished 4 years out of the Army, Kathy kind of wanted to come back to Dallas, where she grew up, and, I didn't think God meant for us to be in that much traffic every day. I don't know how y'all do that. I mean, I lose my Christian witness out there. All those cars backed up for 3 exits trying to, and I thought maybe they're all coming here. But anyway, so we compromised, and we both had 2 interviews and both had 2 offers from the 2 interviews. We settled in Tyler. But back in the 90s, I was a judge, and I'd heard some guy named Rush Limbaugh. And it's neat when people that I really thought the world of, and you get to meet them, and they're as neat as you thought they were. Chuck Colson was somebody I'd idolized, and it was neat. He introduced me to some people. He's a very dear friend, a fellow warrior. That meant more to me, I tell you. But anyway, Rush, through the 90s, I'd heard him talking about how stupid it was that the Republicans had taken back the House of Representatives, but they allowed this automatic increase in every department, every agency's budget year after year, and how crazy that was. So I was surprised when I took office in January 2005, nothing still had been done. And we had a Republican president, we had a majority in the Senate, and nothing had been done. And I brought it up in one of our conferences to the budget chairman. Why don't we eliminate the automatic increases? And I was standing at the member mic, and the chairman at that time, he went from there to be in the Bush White House, worked for President Bush. But he said, well, we have to have those increases. And I said, yeah, like some of y'all, why? His verbatim answer, because it's the law. I didn't even have to say anything. He went, you're right, we'll make the law and we could change it. But it's just, I couldn't believe a Republican, well, it's the law, we have to do that. Anyway, you're right, we make the law, we could change it, but we're not going to. And so then we lost the majority in 2006. After John Boehner had been our majority leader for about 10 or 11 months, we lost the majority. And then he was the minority leader for 4 years. And I tried to explain, guys, and they didn't appreciate it when I explained at conference. We didn't win back the majority because of John Boehner. Well, people have been saying, he's the reason, look at the polls. We didn't earn back the majority. The Democrats lost the majority because of Obamacare. Yes. I would love it if we had earned it back, but we didn't. They're madder at them than they are at us. That's the reason we got the majority. And we need to earn it back. So anyway, every session I'd filed a zero baseline budget bill. That means eliminate the automatic increase. After I've been there 7 years, I got Boehner to agree that if Paul Ryan brings it out of his budget committee, votes it out successfully, then yeah, okay, I'll bring it to the floor. And I'd agree, you can put it under anybody's name, I don't care. And so he didn't know I'd already gotten Paul to agree he was going to bring it out of committee. He'd been a co-sponsor every year I'd filed it. So anyway, so there's plenty of things we disagree on, but there's a lot of things we agree on, and that was one of them. And I asked Paul, I said, why did the former chairman. And I was like, why didn't he? He said, I never figured out why he didn't support this. Because you understand, we set ourselves up to be brutalized, because when you slow the rate of growth, we've made these draconian cuts. By golly, if we're going to get accused of making a cut, I want a real cut. You know, if we're going to take that abuse, let's have a real cut. And so anyway, one of the sharpest guys in Congress, he was new back then, but Rob Woodall from Georgia, he replaced John Linder, who was a brilliant guy, and he came up with the idea of something called the fair tax. But I just loved John, classy guy, and he tried to prepare me for what was coming back in 2010. But I'll touch on that in a second. But anyway, Rob, it's the Woodall bill, fantastic, voted out of committee, comes to the floor. We passed it on the House floor, and then the Senate didn't do anything. But that's the way it goes. You know, you just have to keep fighting. Don't give up. Keep 7 years to even get that. And so then in the last Congress, Paul came up to me last year and he said, Louie, we're going to pass the zero baseline out again. And I said, great, great. He said, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to call it the Woodall-Gohmert bill this time. And I said, Paul, don't put my name on there, because Boehner won't bring it to the floor if you put Gohmert on there. Don't do that. And he said, I've already told the Speaker, look, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows it's Louie's bill. He's been pushing it since he got here, so it wouldn't hurt to have his name as second. So we passed the Woodall-Gohmert bill, and it didn't go anywhere. But at the end of August 2012, when Paul was selected to be vice presidential candidate, I said, Paul, you've got a real good issue that could help you and Romney, and not only help you guys win the White House, but also help us win back the majority in the Senate. And you can be the hero. I pushed the zero baseline out. We're ending the automatic increase in every department. And you can make it a really strong politically, because point out accurately, there's no person, there's no charity, there's no business, there's no partnership. Nobody in America gets an automatic increase in their budget every year, and the federal government should not either. And that's a winning issue, because people can understand and identify with that. And I said, so you ought to mention it to Romney's policy people, and then you can go ahead and brag, you got it through the House, because he did. And then that will put pressure on the Senate. We can demand a vote down there, and if you're the candidate on the national stage, that will put pressure on the Senate. If they don't bring it to the floor, which they probably won't, it'll help us replace more Democrats. It'll be good all the way around. And he said, that's a great idea. So the next week when he came back from campaigning, I said, did you get a chance to talk to Romney's policy people? He said, yes, I did. And I told them all a great idea, help us win the Senate, and help us win the White House. And they made very clear that I was selected to help campaign, and they will tell me what I'm to talk about. And when they want my opinion about an issue, they'll ask my opinion about the issue, but otherwise I'm to say what they tell me to say and go where they tell me to go. But he said, so they're not going to listen there with the Romney campaign. That was a problem, wasn't it? Yeah. They didn't listen? Yeah. So he said, but I promise you this, if I am vice president of the country, which means president of the Senate, first bill I bring up in the Senate will be the zero baseline. We'll end the automatic increases for good. Now, for those that weren't following, he didn't end up being vice president. So, but anyway, that is a positive development. Yes. Now that guy that pushed it out of his committee is Speaker of the House. And he's going to be able to put more pressure on poor old Mitch McConnell, you know? So that's a good thing. Now, and also then Carly Fiorina brought it up this week. Now, I heard her talking about, we ought to start with zero, and that it's just, that bill's just been sitting there. So we need to get her the information. Well, actually, we passed it out of the House twice, and we're going to pass it again under Paul. And then also that it doesn't even start at zero. It just doesn't start with an increase. It starts where they were last year. So we have a fight to ever get to zero, and they're right. We need to. I loved hearing during the debate, there's these departments we need to get rid of. And so anyway, and I felt, I told Ted back last spring that I would endorse him, support him. So with that fair notice, that's where I was. But I love Trump getting so much attention to our debates. I love him bringing attention to the border issues. I mean, there's a lot of good things going on. Poor John Kasich, he didn't get the memo. He didn't get the memo that if you want to pick on somebody on the stage, don't make it Ted Cruz, because he may fire back. And anyway, bless his heart. Anyway, that was amazing. And Ted had asked me to come up and do interviews in the spin room afterwards, because I didn't know they had that spin room. And a candidate can't talk to everybody. So I said, well, I'll come if I don't have to cancel any of the things I've already got scheduled, because I had stuff in my district. So what that meant was that I flew into DFW from speaking to the Israel Allies deal Monday night, and raced back to Kilgore and had an event there at Kilgore College. Kilgore Rangerettes, 75 years old. Amazing. Gussie Nell Davis started that 75 years ago, because the president of Kilgore College, she had been a Rockette, and he wanted somebody to do something so people wouldn't leave at halftime. And he thought maybe, seriously. So he got that Rockette and said, hey, you're from East Texas. You think you could get some girls and do something at halftime that would keep people from leaving the game? And they did. And it worked out real well. So anyway, back there to Kilgore, and then rushed back, caught the 3 o'clock plane to Milwaukee, flew to Milwaukee, and Ted had somebody there to race me to the thing. I got to see both debates and then do the spin room. And the only way I could avoid missing my event in Nacogdoches at 10:30 was to be on the 5 a.m. flight out of Chicago. So at 2 a.m. I'm heading for Chicago, and I'm giving myself an excuse for why I may not be at the top of my game. But anyway, made it to Chicago and make the 8 o'clock flight, or made it back here to 8 o'clock, and got to Nacogdoches, and then I get to be, had a bunch of stuff in the district the last 2 days, and then I get to be with you guys, because y'all are such an encouragement. But anyway, zero baseline budget, that's an encouraging thing. And another encouraging thing is what I mentioned. 2 of the top 3 leaders that were a problem are not a problem for us anymore. Yay. Okay? Now, so those are good things. And I'm, the night before I speak, I always make me an outline, and then I pray that I'll forget anything that I shouldn't say. And sometimes I don't forget it, and I say things I shouldn't say anyway. But, we had a conversation, some of us back this summer, because the push was growing to get a new speaker. And some people were saying, I bet Boehner's going to wait till January. He will have served 25 years and then will resign 25 years. And I said, no, the feelings around here are growing. I don't think he's going to make it till January. But we know he won't leave before September because, he's worked so hard to try to get the Pope to come. So I think, seriously, the Pope, it'll be sometime after the Pope comes. So Randy Weber, great guy from down around Houston, Randy goes, so Louie, what you're telling us is you think we're going to have Pope and change. Yeah. So we had Pope and change. Yeah. Now, Dennis Miller nearly never makes me laugh, but when I heard him call him Tammy Faye Boehner, that cracked me up. But anyway, I do want, when I was here a couple years ago, I was talking about some ideas. I love Arthur Laffer. I know he used to go by Art, but his son goes by Art now. And so Ted would run his ideas on taxes. And I told Laffer one time back when Herman Cain was running, I said, look, I know you helped Cain with his 999 plan. I like the first two nines, but I cannot abide an income tax and adding a sales tax. In Texas, we don't want to add another 9% to the 8.25% we already got. And he said, well, actually, I helped him with that because that's what he wanted. But my son and I have worked out a 12-12 plan. Now, I like the sound of that. And then I like Ted's new 10% flat tax and 16% for business. But I'm open to anything. I just think we ought to throw out the code, and then let's have a debate, and whichever wins, fair tax, flat tax, let's go with it. But you can't start a sales tax and not completely have eliminated the income tax. You just can't, because it'll never go away then, and they'll both build up. But anyway, a lot of y'all are so plugged in. You knew who Art Laffer was and the Laffer curve. And Laffer told me one time, he said, Lou, you're a big idea guy. I love your big idea. Well, one of the things we've got to do before we can do any good, of course, is end the automatic increases. Another thing, and I've talked to Paul about it, he likes the idea. He said, but Louis, you realize what we're up against? I don't know if it's doable. And I said, Paul, it's something we've got to try. Because the Democrats created the playing field, and it's not a level playing field. It's very, very slanted from their direction. And they set these rules in place, the automatic increase, a number of other things. They set them in place when they had the most liberal Congress till Pelosi got the gavel, after Watergate. And people didn't notice much for what they did, but they set the rules that make it impossible to get this country back properly on track. So the 60s started the war on war on poverty, and that's when welfare was created and all. But they had figured out by the late 70s, if you want to keep it where Republicans, even if they ever did get back in charge, they can never fix the problem or fix what we do to them. We'll get everybody beholden to the government, and then they'll want us and need us, and Republicans will be saying need less government, and people will like that less and less because more and more of them are getting benefits from the government. And so what you do is you spread that welfare, you spread the government assistance out among all these different subcommittees in different parts, the different subcommittee jurisdiction of appropriation. And so if you try to take one of these out in one of the different budgets of one of the different entities, then you get to beat up Republicans. And they hate seniors, they hate women, they hate children, they hate men, whatever it is they go after. They hate veterans. It doesn't matter. We can go after them for something when they try to make one of the cuts of the many duplications we have. So you got to spread that all out. And the big idea was this, and Robert Rector at the Heritage Foundation, one that gave me the idea, he said, I didn't realize I was giving you that idea, but he works for 2 years to find all the different public assistants in all the different departments. So it was a no-brainer for me to go, well, then we need to get all of that in one subcommittee's appropriation bill. And Robert was going, well, that's a really good idea. And I said, that's the only way we'll ever be able to address all of this. An example, Dan Webster, one of his pets is transportation. He loves to study transportation and answers. After Dan got to Congress in November 2010, he has spent a long time now studying, he picked out this one issue. How many federal programs are charged with getting people to and from an appointment? You know, whether it's veterans, kids, seniors, he said, and he told me a couple of weeks ago, I'm pretty sure I found them all. It's possible there could be one or two, but I've been so thorough in going through all the different appropriations, I think I found them all. There are 82. Now, when one of those 82 come up for an appropriation, if you try to stop it, then people go nuts. How can you do that? You must hate women or seniors or veterans or something. Well, if you had all 82 of those in one committee's budget, one appropriation, then you can say, no, we don't hate anybody. We just don't need 82 programs, and nearly all of them had 20-seat vans. Nearly all of them sit empty most of the time. Nearly all of them, they average about 3 people taking them to and from visits. So that's when you can start making a difference. So it's something that we need to work on, and I put it on your radar, and it's on Paul's radar. But you got to start fighting and pushing and trying sometime. One thing, I told 3 minutes, let me just say, important to all of us, I think, here, was something that was called the Iran deal. It was an Iran treaty. It is a treaty. And you cannot amend the non-proliferation treaty like this did, 3 different places, without it being a treaty. You can't have an agreement that deals with arms and purchase, as this Iran treaty does, without it being a treaty. And it also, the Corker bill, give people the benefit of the doubt that pushed it, supported it. They were going based on what Kerry and Obama promised, but it broke all those promises. And when I guest hosted Sean Hannity's radio show in September, it was the day after I got back from a trip by myself to Egypt. No other members of Congress, senators. But, and I met with the head of their intelligence. They said I'm the only member of Congress so far they've ever allowed to meet. We met for about 2 hours. And if you think what's public is scary, what's going on, you don't want to know what's really happening behind the scenes. So I was just so convicted coming back. We've got to do something to stop this. What have I got? And it was clear that the way to stop it is call it what it is, a treaty. And you all know the Constitution requires 2/3 vote in the Senate for it to ratify it. Otherwise, it's dead. And I knew if we could just get a vote in the Senate, they won't get the 2/3, and it'll be dead, and you could go to court and keep them from releasing that $100 billion, $150 billion, and it won't be just that. It'll be $100 billion or so every year. And they've already said they're going to use a bunch of it to help Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists and whatnot. So I thought, what do I have? I don't have any money. My wife and I cashed in everything to run for Congress, and except our house. And so I don't have money. And it's sure not giving them my integrity. But I thought, Boehner and McConnell would love to have me out of Congress. And I thought, okay. And I made this offer on Hannity's show, and I'd really been wrestling for overnight. Okay, said, if you will just treat it as the treaty it is, call for a vote in the Senate, have the vote, because it won't get 2/3, and we can stop it. And if you'll do that, I won't run again. No, I made that offer on Hannity's show. And I thought, look, I'm in the middle of a lot of fights. But if I could go out saying I helped end the Iran deal and help protect Israel, because this really puts Israel in so much danger. And I'm sure all of you know, if Israel's in danger, we're in more danger. There's just no question about it. And so anyway, but I added, and people have reported, well, he said he's not running again. No, I said if they treat it like a treaty, and I also added, if they don't treat it as a treaty, I will run again, and I will become Mitch McConnell's worst nightmare. So anyway, we are so blessed in Texas. We got great representatives. I thank the world of Sam Johnson, and he knows what it is not to have freedom. And I said after I visited Guantanamo, Sam, we give them prayer rugs. We have an arrow in their cell that points to Mecca, and we give them a Quran that no human hand has ever touched. They have a basket system. They make sure no American ever touches one of their Qurans. I said, is that pretty much the way the Hanoi Hilton was the 7 years you were there? And he said, well, we didn't have a prayer rug, but they took a little metal rod, and they knew right where your knees would go. They put your ankles in shackles. They would beat you from behind until you didn't want to drop because you knew how bad it hurt. But eventually you would fall on your knees, and they would hit that rod, and you would be there with all your weight. And he said, I know it doesn't sound bad. And I said, it sounds bad. And he said, well, it was excruciating. He said, so we didn't have a prayer rug, but we would be for hours with all of our body weight on those little rods. Folks, if you think it couldn't happen again, you need to think again. And we are moving in the direction of helping Iran. This deal puts us in the position of defending Iran against Israel. I mean, that doesn't come out well. It doesn't come out well at all. So for those that believe in the power of prayer, keep praying and be encouraged. We're making progress. We can't quit. We have got to fight because this country is worth fighting for, and the message of our generation should be to Franklin, we're still keeping it. Thank y'all very much.